In 1974, a stretch of highway was built just outside a small, forgotten town. Concrete pillars rose from the ground like silent giants, and 18 inches of asphalt sealed the earth beneath them. To the thousands of drivers who passed over it every day, it was just another road. But beneath that road, there was something the engineers never fully understood. Because long before the highway existed, that land had been a cemetery, an old necropolis, hundreds of graves dating back more than a century. When the highway project began, records were incomplete, budgets were tight, and construction moved fast. Instead of relocating the entire graveyard, workers simply filled the area with soil and gravel. Headstones were removed. Bodies were left where they were. Then the highway was poured directly on top. For decades, no one thought about it again. Above the ground, engines roared every morning. Cars accelerated. Freight trucks thundered past. But below the concrete, the old graves remained. Cracked stone markers still stood between the support pillars. Roots twisted through forgotten coffins, and a narrow crawl space formed between the packed earth and the underside of the road. Only 18 inches separated the living from the dead. For many years, the space remained silent, until the sightings began. At first, they were dismissed as trespassers. Maintenance workers reported seeing pale shapes moving between the pillars, long, thin figures slipping through the dim light beneath the overpass. When flashlights were pointed toward them, the shapes vanished. Security cameras occasionally caught blurred movement, but nothing clear enough to identify. Authorities assumed it was squatters, but the strange part was no supplies were ever found. No blankets, no food containers, no footprints, just silence. Then in early 2026, a highway inspection crew installed thermal cameras to monitor structural stress in the concrete. What those cameras recorded was never meant to be public. The footage showed heat signatures moving slowly through the crawl space. Not animals, not people. The shapes were too tall and too thin. Their bodies looked stretched, almost translucent, as if made from something between mist and skin. Even stranger, the entities became more visible when vehicles passed overhead. Every time a truck rolled across the highway, the shapes would pulse with faint warmth, like they were feeding on the vibrations. Researchers reviewing the footage proposed an unsettling theory. These were not traditional ghosts. They were something else, something evolving. Decades of constant motion above the cemetery had created a strange environment. Engines produced low-frequency vibrations. Carbon emissions seeped through cracks in the asphalt. The endless movement of commuters generated kinetic energy day and night, and whatever remained beneath the graves had adapted to it. The entity seemed to react to motion. They moved when traffic increased. They gathered beneath the busiest lanes, almost like organisms feeding on energy. Translucent skin allowed them to blend with the shadows. Their bodies stretched thin to navigate the narrow space between soil and concrete. They were no longer just remnants of the dead. They had become something new. Urban predators, born in darkness. Curiosity eventually led one investigator to enter the crawl space personally. A structural engineer named David volunteered to document the interior. Wearing a headlamp and body camera, he slid into the narrow opening beneath the highway. The space was colder than expected. Dust drifted in the air. Old stones emerged from the soil like broken teeth. Some still had faded names carved into them. As David moved deeper, the noise of traffic became overwhelming. Every passing truck sent tremors through the ground, and something strange began appearing on the audio recorder. Sharp spikes, low, distorted sounds, almost like whispers being dragged through metal. The deeper he went, the stranger the markings became. The support pillars were covered with scratches, not random damage, patterns, long curved symbols that no language expert has ever been able to identify. And then, David stopped walking, because something ahead of him moved. His flashlight beam landed on a figure standing beside a collapsed headstone. Tall. Too tall. Its body was stretched thin like a shadow pulled upright. Its skin reflected the light faintly, almost transparent. For several seconds, the entity didn't move. Normally, previous sightings described them retreating immediately when exposed to light, but this one didn't retreat. It simply watched him, and when a freight truck thundered across the highway above them, The creature seemed to grow darker, more solid. David slowly backed away, but the figure followed, not quickly, just a few inches, like it was testing its boundary. The recording ended shortly after. David exited the crawlspace without speaking and refused to discuss what he saw. But in the months that followed, something else began happening above the highway. Drivers started reporting strange incidents. Vehicles stalled without explanation. Engines lost power for several seconds, then restarted. Some drivers described a sudden heaviness in their cars, as if an extra passenger had climbed into the back seat. Others claimed they briefly saw pale shapes reflected in their rearview mirrors. Always in the back seat, always gone when they turned around. Traffic cameras recently captured footage of a truck slowing down suddenly on the exact stretch above the cemetery. The driver later explained why. He said something appeared in his mirror, something sitting behind him, thin arms resting on the seat, watching the road with him. And according to researchers studying the thermal data, the heat signatures beneath the highway have started appearing closer to the surface, closer to the asphalt, closer to the living, which leads to one final, disturbing possibility. For 50 years, the entities remained trapped beneath the road, feeding quietly on vibration and movement. But now, the movement above them is increasing. More traffic, more energy, more opportunity. And if those creatures have truly evolved, then the highway may no longer be their prison. It may be their doorway. So the next time you drive across a quiet stretch of road late at night and your car suddenly feels heavier, don't check the mirror, just keep driving, because whatever lives beneath that highway may already be riding with you.